2024 coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here's the video that you came here for. But over the last couple of days, the big story in college sports, specifically college football, has been National Signing Day. Did a little bit of a preview on Wednesday, and so I would be remiss if we didn't do kind of the recap overview here on the Friday Aaron Torres pod going into the holiday week, okay? So we're going to get into all of the winners and losers and storylines and who flipped here and what kid went there and what it all means in the bigger picture. But there is one school that we absolutely have to talk about to lead this because they just put on a recruiting clinic for the ages, okay? And you're probably not going to be surprised to hear who it is. But over this recruiting cycle and really over the last 48 or so hours, really Tuesday afternoon to Thursday afternoon, Nick Saban and Alabama had as good of a run as any school that I can ever remember. And so I know Alabama has had great classes before. And I know it's easy to always credit Nick Saban for everything. But I truly believe that Nick Saban from about Tuesday midday to Thursday midday had as good a run as anybody in recent memory, putting a cap on one of the great classes that we have seen in recent memory. And so, first of all, as a little bit of a backdrop, even going into this week, what's crazy is Nick Saban and Alabama had the number one recruiting class coming into the week, okay? Number one safety in America, Caleb Downs, was committed forever. Keon Keeley, a defensive end from Tampa, who was originally committed to Notre Dame. He's been committed to Alabama for a few weeks now. And so if Alabama had done nothing over the last couple weeks, or last couple days, excuse me, they still would have had the number one class in the country, and I don't think anybody could have even conceivably caught them. And so had Nick Saban done nothing, kicked his feet up, had a cold glass of whatever, and relaxed, Alabama would have had the number one class in the country. But you know Nick Saban. You know he's mad. He's always mad about something. He's coming off a disappointing season, and he went on a warpath specifically the last 2 days. So first off, Tuesday afternoon, Caden Proctor, number 2 offensive tackle in all of high school football from the state of Iowa, had committed to Iowa over Alabama back in June. Well, Nick Saban wasn't having that, okay? Over the last couple of weeks, we really started to see that Caden Proctor was maybe willing to open his recruitment. When Deion Sanders got the job at Colorado, he offered him. Caden Proctor had Dan Lanning, the Oregon head coach, into his home. But what was interesting was this past weekend, just a few days ago, Caden Proctor actually made a visit to Alabama while still being committed to Iowa. Why does that matter? It's because it was a dead period in recruiting, which means that he couldn't meet with the coaching staffs. He couldn't really do much of anything. And it was an unofficial visit that he paid for out of his own pocket. So when a kid is committed somewhere else, and you feel bad for Iowa fans, but this is just the world that we live in, committed somewhere else, goes to Alabama on his own dime, you know that's a good thing. And on Tuesday, he officially flipped from Iowa to Alabama, the number 2 offensive tackle in this class. And I got to believe, based on how that offensive line has played the last couple of years, Caden Proctor could be playing for Alabama very soon. But our buddy Nick Saban wasn't done, because on Wednesday, there were a pair of defensive linemen from the state of Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama specifically, high school teammates, James Smith and Quay Russo. Okay, we talked about them a little bit on Wednesday's show, but it seemed as though everything was trending towards Alabama. Hugh Freeze, who we'll talk about in a minute, made a late push. But at the end of the day, they both also commit to Alabama. So just on Tuesday, just on Wednesday, Nick Saban gets 3 5-star commitments. And to be clear, there were only 3 other schools total that got 3 5-star commitments. Nick Saban got 3 in the final 48 hours of signing day. Here's the crazy part. Thursday, there was 1 5-star remaining. It was a kid named Desmond Ricks, cornerback, who was actually a member of the class of 2024, decides to reclassify and enroll in college next year. He makes that announcement a few weeks ago, and it is a foregone conclusion he's going to LSU. Don't even need to bother showing up. Don't even need to be in front of the computer when he commits, because this kid's going to LSU. It's a done deal. It's been a done deal forever. Oh, but here's the thing. On Thursday morning, after signing day, he was planning on committing on Thursday. But you kind of start to hear some rumors that maybe Alabama could be in the mix. And Nick Saban kind of said on his signing day press conference, we might not be done yet. Well, on Thursday, Desmond Ricks, cornerback, commits to not LSU, but Alabama. And so that should be the finishing touches of Alabama's recruiting class. But here's what you need to know. In the last 48 hours, between Tuesday afternoon and Thursday afternoon, Alabama got 4 5-star commits. There are 130, let me put it this way. There are 131 teams that play Division I FBS football. One of them outside of Alabama had 4 5-stars in the entire cycle. Alabama has 4 in the final 48 to 72 hours of the recruiting cycle. On top of that, they have 7 overall 5-stars, by far the most. There are only 35 total 5-stars in the class. Alabama got 7 of them. 1 out of every 5 players commits. And how about this? 15 of the top 100 players in all of high school football have committed to Alabama. And so what I want to say in the big picture, I'm not a recruiting guy. I'm not a historian of recruiting, but this is one of the great recruiting classes in the history of the recruiting rankings in football, right? Again, the number 1 safety, top edge rusher, number 2 offensive tackle, number 2 interior defensive lineman, number 3 interior defensive lineman. And then on top of that, you get an elite cover corner in Desmond Ricks, Justice Haynes, by the way, a 5-star running back who is a Georgia legacy, also commits to Alabama. So one, just on paper, couple things. One, just on paper, this is one of Alabama's great recruiting classes ever. Credit Nick Saban, this and that. But credit Nick Saban, especially in this season, this year, this moment in time, for pulling this off. Couple things stand out. One, remember, it was May that he was talking about and worried about NIL and the impact that it was going to have on college football. We remember the dust up with Jimbo Fisher, but remember all of the pushback by Nick Saban's comments. Now, I didn't like how Nick Saban called out Jimbo Fisher individually. But I saw a lot of people, oh, Nick Saban's mad. He's not going to get all the best players. I said, no. That's not what this is about. He just doesn't want it to become a pay-for-play thing because he is worried about the present and future of college football. He actually cares about the kids, their futures, their life. He cares about a lot of things, and it's not just whether he has access to the best players or not. So I bring it up because think about the circumstances that Nick Saban was going against. This NIL world where we know, and I don't believe Alabama is one of these schools. I believe Alabama, I'm sure all their players are getting something for NIL. But I believe that Nick Saban is still selling that old school NFL over NIL. You come here, you compete, you will compete for championships. You will get better every day by playing against elite players at practice. And there is no better way to get ready for the NFL, where the real money is, than Alabama. So one, in the NIL world, Nick Saban is still getting the best classes. So for people who said, oh, he's just worried he's not going to get the best players, well, that's nonsense. But two, a couple other factors. The product on the field wasn't that good this year. And we all know the facts, and we all know the bottom line, and we all understand that 10-2 isn't acceptable at Alabama. So one, you have NIL. Two, you have a bad product on the field where you go 10-2 easily, as we've discussed many times, could have lost to Texas, could have lost to Ole Miss, won Texas A&M at home on the final play of the game. And three, and I think this is important, Nick Saban is 71 years old right now. So one, to just go out and have the energy to do what he did to close the kids that he closed on is incredible. But two, you got to understand, he's recruiting a lot of these kids. If they stay 4 years, he's going to be 75 by the time they graduate. And so if you don't think other schools are using that against him in recruiting, Nick Saban ain't going to be there when you finish your college. Nick Saban ain't going to be there. He's not going to be there 4 years from now. If you don't think that Nick Saban dealt with negative recruiting in a way that he probably never has before for all of those factors, and he still closed out this class, that's why I believe it is one of the best classes that he has ever pulled off. And let me finally say this about Nick Saban. As I said a minute ago, Nick Saban talked about in May about NIL and where he didn't like where college football was going, where you just pay for the best players. And as I said a minute ago, I don't believe that NIL is the sole reason that most of these players, if any of them, are choosing Alabama. But why I bring it up is because when Nick Saban said all that, he got criticized and he got crushed and you don't care. You're just worried because you're not going to get the best players anymore. You're not going to have a monopoly. And so what I would say, and I've told you this before, understand one thing, that when Nick Saban tells you something is not for the best of college football, that it's going to hurt college football, he is saying that from a place of love, of concern, of care. He is a guy that cares about the present and future of college football long after he's gone. So when he says it's not for the health of college football, listen to him. But here's the other thing. Eventually, he's going to say it, but then once he acknowledges that this is how it's going to be, he is going to figure out the way to be the best at it, okay? Remember, offense, about 10 years ago, he said, I don't like where this is going. Too much speed, too many plays, guys are going to get hurt. NCAA didn't care. Rules didn't get changed. What did Nick Saban do? Went out and hired Lane Kiffin, went out and hired Steve Sarkisian, went out and hired Brian Dable, Mike Loxley, and now he has one of the most explosive offenses in college football. So yeah, he was warning you, and then he took advantage of it, and then he became the best at it. The transfer portal. He said, I don't really like where this is going. I don't like that players are going to come and go. And then what happened? Went out and got Jamison Williams, first-round pick. Jahmyr Gibbs, who's going to be a first-round pick this year. Jermaine Burton, who could probably be a first-round pick next year. Henry To'oTo'o, who was all SEC this year. Didn't like the transfer portal, then he got really good at it. And so if NIL is the future, if this is where the sport is going, just understand, just be warned. Nick Saban's going to evolve and adapt. He might not like it. It might not be what he wants to do, but he is going to make sure that Alabama doesn't get left behind. So congratulations to Alabama fans. Not only another number one class, but I think this might be the most impressive because, again, coming off a disappointing season, Saban 71, a lot of negativity. I would add this. I think a lot of that coaching staff isn't going to be in place a month from now. And so for Saban to get this done, I think was one of the best things, one of the best classes that he's ever had.